the session, we're going to talk about what you're wired to do. That's what aptitudes are. And these weren't true tests. They're not like school tests. You couldn't have studied. There's no bad or good scores, no passing or failing. There's no judgments on an aptitude assessment. So what are you wired to do? What's going to come naturally to you? And we can predict the types of activities that you'll enjoy doing most. Okay? So you're basically a non-spatial specialist. So that means we're going to suggest you really focus on a particular area in the liberal arts that you find really interesting and just delve into that. So what I'd like to start out with is a discussion of the word association score. That was the test you did this morning where the administrator said a word, you said the first word that came to mind. You probably felt like you were at a psychologist's office, right? But we weren't psychoanalyzing you. We were determining whether you are what we call objective or subjective in personality. And what we mean by objective is the type of person who likes to work with and through others as part of a team, collaborating, delegating. It's typical of managers, executives, and salespeople. Those who score subjective tend to refer to as more individual and specialized. Subjectivity is more typical of researchers, college professors, creative artists. They're experts, they're specialists, they rely more on their own efforts and expertise. That's the range we think you belong in. So anywhere in this range, we still encourage people to head more into the individual work approach to start off with. And usually in my experience, people in this range tend to identify more with this work approach than with this work approach. So this is the type of person who tends to like to have kind of a personal connection to their work rather than it being a job that's separate from them. So we encourage people in this range to you really kind of determine what their interests are. What are they really ideally passionate about they can delve into and become an expert at. And sometimes it takes a while to figure that out. Sometimes you have to go through a couple of years of college and take a bunch of courses and you say, wow, this is it. This is what I want to major in. This is what I want to go to grad school for. Does this surprise you that you're more in this range than this range, or would you have guessed that about yourself?
Yeah.
Why would you have guessed that?
I don't know. I'm not great with working with people.
You like doing things
On my own.
on your own, having kind of ownership and control of your own work? Okay. We had these abstract drawings, you had to write all the things that made you think of, reminded you of. So you just saw a few things for each picture. Now some people might look at that and see like 20 things right off the top of their head. So they're very different in their approach to goal setting. High foresight people tend to think way down the road and look way ahead, and they kind of dwell in the future, and that's what gets them kind of ripped up. Low foresight people tend to focus much more on the here and the now. They're much more zen, they're in the moment, they're present, and they like to see results right away. Again, if you have a high language aptitude, it means you can learn the vocabulary of foreign languages easily. You can also learn technical terminology easily. And that's going to be very useful for you if you work bilingually and or working in a field that involves a lot of technical terminology like law or psychology. We're going to focus primarily on the high scores because those are the things that you're kind of wired to do. These aptitudes are innate abilities that remain pretty stable throughout your life. And if you're tapping into your highest abilities, you're likely to find the work engaging and enjoyable for you. But I'd like to start out with a discussion of your spatial aptitude called structural visualization. That's a combination of your wiggly block, which was almost off the chart, and paper folding, which was above average. Both of these traits measure structural visualization. It's the ability to visualize three-dimensional structures and forms, and that's typical of engineers, architects, physical and natural scientists, but not typical of bankers, lawyers, or accountants. And you score very high in that. Does that surprise you that you are a spatial thinker, or would you have guessed that about yourself?
I kind of know maybe I lean more towards that than the opposite end of the spectrum.
You wanted to go into an academic area that involved spatial thinking, it would mostly be the STEM areas. You know what STEM stands for?
No.
So it's science, technology, engineering, and math. Those tend to be more three-dimensional. But also you have to throw the STEAM in there to pay for arts, like architecture, three-dimensional art. So those would be the things that we suggest you consider when you score high in the spatial. You also have an outstanding design memory, which is the ability to notice and remember shapes, patterns, and designs. Remember the connect the dot test? So that's typically high in visual artists. It doesn't measure an artistic ability, but fine artists and graphic designers tend to score high in that. But when we combine it with the spatial aptitude, that's the typical combination of architects, design engineers, industrial designers, fine artists too, like sculptors and ceramists. So if you don't think of yourself as being artistic, you might really think of yourself more as a technical designer, like designing and building bicycles and motorcycles, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Would you like to learn how to design motorcycles or bikes?
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. Yeah.
So you might even think about, either, obviously that would be engineering, but it could also be industrial design.
Yeah.
And of course, you're extremely talented with small tools. You have 90th percentile tweezer dexterity. And that's the ability to do delicate work with small tools, like a surgeon, or a dentist, or an electrician. So you're really the spatial specialist with outstanding design, dexterity, and auditory talents. So what does that translate to? If you're subjective, we think you need to find work where you can really dive in and become an expert and specialist. And it should be in a spatial field. Spatial means you're dealing with machinery and things and objects. You start your own business related to restoring and repairing fine art objects. Become a conservator focusing on preservation of sculpture, 3D art installations.
That's very interesting. Yeah, I really like restoration.
Really? How did you become interested in that?
Well, I think I really like history.
Mm-hmm.
And history.